Fox News radio studios in Midtown Manhattan. It's the fastest growing radio talk show. Brian Kilmeade.
Big hour coming your way. Coming from Washington, D.C. I was covering the Law Enforcement Foundation Memorial yesterday, where candlelight vigil represented and saluted 282 who lost their lives in the line of duty. Pretty amazing to see 30-plus thousand people. With front of me was the Capitol. Behind me was the Washington Monument. The weather could not have been more perfect. Slight breeze, 72 degrees. Everybody was there. Health and Human Services Secretary Mayorkas, the FBI director, CIA director, all on stage, there to salute the men and women in uniform, and more and more people are giving them a respect. This hour, we're going to be joined by Nellie Bowles, a reporter for the Free Press and author of a new book called Morning After the Revolution, Dispatches from the Wrong Side of History. In other words, she was canceling people. Now she's not. George P. Bush is here, served as commissioner of the Texas General Land Office. As you know, we're on in Dallas now. If you want to get a sense of what Texas is about and what gets them excited, KLAF fans, George P. Bush will be here, and Senator Tom Cotton is standing by. Before we get to the senator, let's get to the big three.
Now, with the stories you need to know, it's Brian's Big Three.
Number 3.
What do they achieve by walking out? I mean, I think people have a right to protest, but you should go get a permit and you give them a place to protest. They don't have a right to block traffic. They don't have a right to ruin other things.
That is John Lovitz, believe it or not. I agree with him. Anti-Israel protesters sparking backlash in the polls. And with the people next on the ballot box, perhaps, a lack of leadership from the White House is hurting Dems in the country. I'll explain.
Number 2.
Trump's more ahead than he's ever been. It's going the wrong way. We got to, try to think of something different. Because what we're doing is really, really not working.
James Carville doing a podcast in his kitchen, refusing to get near the microphone. 2024, Biden down at the polls, down with key groups, and dips into his celebrity well for help. Meanwhile, Jen Psaki is fighting his fight in the media and fails spectacularly. We'll go over it.
Number 1.
I've been doing this 60 years, and I can't find the crime here. What I can find is a crime committed today in the courtroom by Michael Cohen. He looked the jury in the eye and he lied. He made up this whole story about why he did it for Pecker.
David Pecker, Trump on trial, day 2 of the Michael Cohen testimony. Cross-examination will begin shortly. It's Cohen's words versus reality. What did the jury hear, and will they believe him? And where is Alan Weissenberg? Who is he? He's the CFO in Rikers Island for a second stint. And if you want to know about the imbalance of our justice system, Senator Tom Cotton, that's a perfect example. You can knock off a liquor store and a bodega in the same day and get a ticket to reappear later on in the next 6 months. But if you're the CFO of the Trump organization who used a car service and charged it to the company, you go to Rikers Island.
Yeah, Brian, the contrast really is stark. Donald Trump is not facing a prosecution in New York. He is facing a persecution. These charges obviously would not be brought against anyone other than President Trump, because the Democratic Party, led by Joe Biden, thinks that this is their only chance to stop him from being elected president, which is to say to stop the American people from electing their preferred candidate. I think the polls you saw yesterday in the New York Times just reaffirm that the Democrats' only campaign strategy, shockingly, is to try to compel their chief opposition, Donald Trump, to stay off the campaign trail and to sit in the courtroom so he can't campaign, and to gag him so he can't respond to false accusations against him by notorious convicted liars like Michael Cohen, and finally to imprison him.
So, Mike, I don't have to tell you that Andrew Weissman did the real investigation under the Robert Mueller probe, but Mueller really wasn't up for much. And Andrew Weissman did all the work, and it failed because there was nothing there ultimately. You could just say these events happened, but there was no collusion with Russia. And Andrew Weissman weighing in on day 1 of Michael Cohen on the stand. Listen to how he saw it. Cut 2.
He was doing very well. I mean, he should be doing well. It's direct. But he was very controlled. And he also is not making any excuses. Like, he didn't say, it didn't come from him where he said, yes, I lied, but it was for him. Like, it was like, I lied.
So Michael Cohen admitted he lied and was composed, and that's what Andrew Weissman picked up out of this. So, and what they're trying to say is that Michael Weissman's words saying that Donald Trump knew exactly what was going on and affected the election. To take a step back, Senator, don't you have to think to yourself, how did President Trump win in 2016? Was it the Russians? Now it was Russia collusion that did it. Then all of a sudden, when Russia collusion fell apart, they just said, well, after 2020, they said he actually won in 2016. Most people never gave him credit for winning that. Now they're saying he only won because no one knew the Stormy Daniels story. Is that fundamentally what they're saying?
Well, the Democratic Party has never come to grips with their own failures. Donald Trump won in 2016 because Americans were fed up with the Obama-Biden economy and a world in chaos. And he's going to win in 2024 once again because they're fed up with Joe Biden's failures as president, and they remember all Donald Trump's successes, that you had good high-paying jobs with rising wages, you had stable prices, a secure border, and America was respected in the world. And since Joe Biden took office, everything has gone to hell in a handbasket.
There's no doubt about it. It's Camp Chaos at this moment. So the president's going to make an economic speech today. Now, inflation went up last quarter 1.5%. Now it's at 2.2%. That happened just as you walked out of the bureau here in Washington, D.C. What's your reaction to that, Senator? I mean, now we got to worry about rates going up because it looks like we've lost control of the prices.
Yeah, unfortunately, Brian, Joe Biden and the Goop troop that is running economic policy for this administration has once again failed to keep prices stable. Families can't even buy bacon and eggs for their kids to eat on the weekend for breakfast. Rents are too high. People can't buy new homes, even if they need to move out of a home, because rates are too high. And it looks increasingly like rates are going to have to remain high to beat the persistent inflation that we've had since almost the moment Joe Biden took office.
Senator, I want to get your perspective on the military because, you know, some people, and I know you'll never entertain this, but some people said that you'd be Donald Trump's person for Secretary of Defense. I know you have a young family, and that's part of the reason you didn't run for president yourself. But that's something for you to make. But is it possible, with the deficit at $34 trillion, to also massively increase our military industrial base and start sending the message to the rest of the world that we're ready for this challenge? Is it possible in this environment to do it? Because we have an administration who's growing the Pentagon budget below inflation and cut missile defense by over $400 million. Missile defense.
Well, not only is it possible, Brian, but it's absolutely necessary. Donald Trump had to do this when he was president to rebuild the military after the devastating cuts of the Obama era. He'll have to do it again after the devastating cuts of the Biden era, made even worse, as you point out, by inflation. Inflation doesn't just affect your family's budget at the grocery store, it affects our military's budget when it's paying our troops and building housing for them and providing them food and clothing, or having to pay more for basic weapons and munitions because of the input cost of things like steel and so forth. But we really don't have a choice. If you look at the threat we face from around the world, not only is there a war in Europe, there's a war in the Middle East, but the biggest threat is still from communist China. Now, fortunately, a lot of what we need to do to rebuild the defense base is not big-ticket, billion-dollar or even trillion-dollar programs. It's getting back to the basic blocking and tackling of building the munitions, the ammunition, the shells, the rounds, the missiles, the rockets that this country needs to win in a shooting war, which is the best way to avoid a shooting war in the first place. That is really vital work. Fortunately, it's work that can be done with a reasonable investment in our defense industrial base.
But the other thing is, and as you know, with your Ivy League education, your Ivy League law degree, and your years in the military, it's possible to make money doing this, especially if NATO was in the buying phase. You don't have to tell Eastern Europe that Russia's a threat. And instead of them having their outdated 1980s Russian stuff, you just say there's got to be a program within 10 years. You buy our stuff. And, you know, we don't have to gouge them, but they could pay for it. Couldn't that be part of this?
Sure. That is part of it. So it's not just investing in our own defense industry here in America. It's providing them the certainty, the steady flow of business that they need. If you're the CEO of a defense company or you're one of the investors who holds the stock of those defense companies, you know that our Department of Defense, in part because of Democratic administrations, has a long history of wild up and down swings in its purchasing patterns. One simple step that I've worked with the Department of Defense and industry to take is long-term, multi-year procurement contracts. We all know that if you shop at Costco or Sam's Club, you get better prices than if you go to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's because you're buying in bulk. Our military needs to do more of that. Another way to give them that certainty is more purchases from friendly nations overseas. What they need more than anything before they're going to invest in, say, a new line or even a new factory is certainty that the business is going to be there for its products 3, 5, 10 years out, and whether that's selling it to countries like Finland and the Baltic countries, or Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the Middle East, or South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and East Asia. They need the certainty of those long-term contracts before they're going to lay out significant investments up front.
Senator, I look forward to that job being offered to you if Donald Trump can pull off this victory. Senator, thanks so much. Great to see you today, and thanks for your time just now.
Thank you, Brian.